Hello everybody, my name is Charlie Chuibaka. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug abuse counselor here in New Mexico, and welcome to Red Road Journeys. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about what the culture of recovery is. Now, this channel is basically designed for people who have already decided to quit whatever substance they're having a problem with, whether it be alcohol, weed, meth, or even something like food. And bow to the food people, that is a really tough one. All right, so I'm not here to convince anybody that they need to quit. If you're here, hopefully you've already decided to quit or to do something about it. If you're not sure, feel free to check us out. I'll be posting videos 2 to 3 times a week and be glad to have you. So what do we mean by culture of recovery? Well, let's look at the word culture without making this a full-blown anthropology course, which I happen to have a degree in cultural anthropology of the 3 degrees I got. By culture, I simply mean, well, let's keep it simple, a way of life. All right, what a human being does, that's culture, the way of life. And that way of life is displayed for all to see. For example, in our clothing. Attire is a huge part of any culture. All right, you look at cultures from around the world that we think of, their traditional regalia, a Buddhist monk, right? I'm Navajo, I don't have my hair in a bun, but I mean, when I have my hair down like this is typically my uniform, usually some kind of guitar, t-shirt, jeans, and yeah, that's it. This is my uniform, because that's who I am. Obviously, a big way of life for me is with music. How would I sum up? Music is a way of life. For me, it is a way of life, and it was a big part of my own recovery process and the way I've maintained being sober. But I'll probably dedicate a video just to that at another time. So let's continue to look at it, say attire. Well, let's look at the booze culture, all right? There's all kinds of clothing for people who are drinking. You have fancy drinking clothes, maybe, you know, all the kind of humor shirts and everything. There are shirts that have the particular brands on them, you know, and then our headgear too. You can't forget that. Our headgear, that says a lot about who we are as well too. I used to have an old visor hat back in the 80s, and it was like small, it was round, it wasn't like the big foamy 80s hats, but it was small, round, and it had like the pull top on the top. I used to think that was cool. Yeah, you probably remember them too, if you had one or seen them. And that says a lot about who that person is. And that's basically our uniform. I mean, you can even get right down to underwear. Ooh, not like, don't confuse, just underwear like this. All right, I mean, yeah, humor is a big part of our attire, and that's a good thing. On the other hand, there's also recovery attire. And that says who we are as well too. That's pretty much a uniform. I mean, there's all the 12-step, you know, t-shirts and everything from different programs, and those really can help us kind of spot each other out, you know, on the lowdown. Say you're traveling and I see that a shirt with a circle and the triangle in the middle. All right, I can be like, ooh, man, they're a 12-step person, and I'll go up to them, especially if I'm in need, and say, hey, man, I see you're a friend of Bill W. You know, you know where there's a meeting at? You know, that's a really cool thing about being in this culture, because it's not only anywhere in the United States. It's anywhere in a lot of countries. You know, I don't want to say it's anywhere in the world. In most first world cultures, you could probably find a 12-step meeting. Another part of anthropology is looking at buildings and structures, because a lot of traditional cultural doings happen in those buildings. For example, a church or a synagogue. Here in the United States, most people, we just take it for granted. But you go to another country and you're like, holy cow. I remember being in Estonia about 5 years ago, and it was like, I think it was like one of the oldest Christian churches in Northern Europe. At least it was in Estonia. And man, talk about the coin being flipped, because usually here in the Southwest, tourists come here and look at us natives and some of our ceremonies and stuff like that. And over there, I was the tourist, and I was looking at real traditional Estonians and in really traditional Christian garb, and there's all this, you know, tourists taking even taking pictures, right, and just staring around. That was really something else. I was really fascinated by how old that building was and the traditional teachings that they had for their spiritual beliefs in there. So buildings and structures are really important. You know, you look at what happens in a bar, all right? Well, it depends on what kind of bar. For example, if you're in a sports bar, it's totally okay to be ranting and raving, yelling and screaming, you know, rooting your team on, or if your team's losing, you know, talking crap about the other team. And then if you go to a really fancy bar, you can't do that stuff. You know, I probably would. I'd be in that fancy bar all, wave, you know, whatever. And yeah, now I get kicked out. So there's rules, conduct, or behavior that are culturally guided to be appropriate. Now, also in that same vein, look at the culture of recovery. Well, we have our own buildings and structures too. You know, there's all kinds of 12-step clubs around the country. Here in the Albuquerque area, there's quite a few. And what we do in there is we learn the process of recovery. All right, and the behaviors, most, you know, I've seen some pretty outlandish stuff in meetings, but for the most part, there's an expected behavior. You're not supposed to, you don't threaten anybody, all right? You don't be condescending. And if you have a problem with a certain group of people, you know, there's all kinds of flavors, cultural flavors in 12-step meetings. Here in the Albuquerque area, there's over 300, well, to a certain 12-step group, there's over 300 meetings a week. There's Native American groups, there's Espanol meeting groups, there's lunch, brown bag meetings, you know, for people working. There's women's only groups, and there's men's stag meetings. Those gendered ones are really important because there's certain things women need to talk about among themselves, and there's certain issues men really need to address on their own. You know, just to kind of augment this a little bit more. Say you went to a hut in Africa, and there was some people in there, some medicine people, and they were teaching the new generation, giving them a rite of passage into, you know, and educating them about what it is to be a man in Africa. And so that medicine person is going to be giving them specific knowledge and instructions, passing on cultural information handed down through generations. It's really the same thing here, you know, in America when it comes to the 12-step meetings. So if you have decided to quit drinking or using drugs, really look at the culture you're engaged in. It would be a good idea to start exploring different cultures, because we can't stay sober in the same culture we're drinking in. For example, imagine 5 years from now. How old are you going to be? Can you really picture yourself hanging out with friends or certain family, you know, just drinking your near beer for 5 years while they've been getting totally shit-faced? You know, you're going to be sitting there, oh yeah, I'm responsible. Look at that. For 5 years, how long is that really going to happen? You know, or you're hanging out with all your stoner buddies and, no man, that's cool. I'm good. You know, while they're baking away, and I mean, that doesn't seem realistic. That's going to last very long. I mean, I couldn't do it. I've been sober a long time, and I couldn't do it. That kind of testing of a person's recovery is not very wise, because even through one relapse, I mean, you know, bad shit can really happen. So imagine yourself 5 years from now and what you would want that to look like. What kind of other culture would you like to explore? It doesn't mean you have to give up your native culture, but what you actually do, your behaviors. That's what culture really is, our behaviors and action that reflect the way of life we're currently living. So even something like changing clothes, if you go to 12-step meetings, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to be always going there wearing your weed t-shirts, you know, or your beer t-shirts. I mean, nobody really cares, but if you're trying to change who you are, you're going to have to change. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. So please click the subscribe button below and the little bell, and we'll let you know whenever I post a new video. And I hope to see you soon.